kind of morning. Well, no, kind of, it's 12. I think we can go with good afternoon now, right? Barely. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Allie Muschlitz. I'm a licensed psychologist. I work over at our Counseling and Mental Health Center on campus. And we are meeting together for Grad Mental Health Series today. Our focus is refreshing your mind, a guided workshop for mindfulness and mood boosting. So as you can imagine, we're going to talk about mindfulness and things around that. Our goal of this presentation, one, a brief introduction and overview of mindfulness. You may have heard of it, but maybe we haven't looked super closely. So we're going to talk a little bit. What is it? What does it mean? What is it comprised of? Some of the benefits of mindfulness as well, and ways for you to practice mindfulness in your daily life. So what are strategies that you could use in your daily life that may be helpful and provide some of the benefits we'll review today? So I want you to take a hold of that chat feature on Zoom. I want you to give me your ideas. When you think of mindfulness, what comes to mind? I will start, and I'll say that when I first started kind of working in mental health and learning about mindfulness, I just have this idea of someone kind of in a crisscross applesauce seating position and like hands like this, maybe more like yoga. That's kind of what comes to mind when I was first learning about mindfulness. How about you? What are things that come to mind as you're thinking about mindfulness? And Michael, I'm having trouble seeing the chat, so if you can see anything, please let me know.
Will do. I'll monitor the chat.
Okay. What are thoughts? When you think about mindfulness, what comes to mind? It could be a particular type of practice. It could be a image.
It looks
Jessica,
like we. Oh yeah.
oh, I say, Jessica, it looks like your hand's raised.
Yeah, hi everyone. For me, mindfulness is just like the way that I've been practicing is just being present in the situation or moment. If I'm cooking, I'm just going to think about the food, what ingredients to add, and just being there, mentally and physically, emotionally, all just together in one place at the same time.
Great. I love that answer. Any other ideas when you think about mindfulness? What comes to mind? I'm sure Jessica's not the only one. You got to have some thoughts. Could be an image, could be a practice, could be a way in which you practice mindfulness in your own life. Oh, I think, oh, I see
Oh, that's
present
me. That was
moment.
me.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry if it was me
I
one.
see one that says present moment. I finally got the chat up. Awareness, calm, being present. Any other ideas that you want to share? When you think about mindfulness, what's coming to mind? It could even be a funny image, you know?
Um, I think one of the most challenging things
Yeah.
about mindfulness is like being present, but in a like and trying to be non-judgmental about whatever the situation, the circumstances, whatever. It's like it could be nearly impossible. But I think that's what we're trying to get to, and.
And we are going to talk about judgment actually, because that is a component of this non-judgmental. But yes, judgment often comes up. We'll actually talk about the practice of mindfulness techniques because I've had a lot of experience at helping people practice these, and there are definitely some learning curves that come along the way, despite how it may sound. All right, we'll move to the next one. So understanding mindfulness. So this is a definition of mindfulness that comes from the American Psychological Association. There are lots of different definitions out there. This is just one. Mindfulness is awareness of one's internal states and surroundings. Mindfulness can help people avoid destructive or automatic habits and responses by learning to observe their thoughts, emotions, and other present moment experiences without judging or reacting to them. I think a simple way that I like to describe mindfulness is the practice of being present in the moment. That's just a really simple version that I like to use. And what are the components of mindfulness? When we're saying that we're being mindful, what is involved with that? So these are three: intention, attention, and attitude. So when we're thinking about intention, we're thinking about purpose. We're thinking about, I'm being intentional in this practice. I can be present in a moment, but am I purposely and intentionally being present? Am I really observing what's happening around me? Attention is kind of the practice of being present. You might notice that you have thoughts or ideas or memories that come up, and the goal is to kind of refocus yourself to be present in that moment. Sometimes I kind of jokingly say, it's kind of avoiding being up here and being more here in the present moment, so that we're kind of avoiding being stuck with our thoughts, oh, I need to do this tomorrow or by tomorrow, or thinking about that thing that happened 15 minutes ago. It's simply practicing being really present in that moment. And last but not least is attitude. And that's really kind of this practice of being non-judgmental, I think particularly towards yourself, trying to be open to the experience and expressing curiosity. I find that curiosity is really helpful in helping avoid non-judgmental experience. I think commonly the biggest judgment that comes up for people while practicing mindfulness, especially those who are new to practicing it, is that you might notice you have lots of thoughts coming up for yourself. And sometimes we can be judgmental of, why can't I kind of sort through? Why can't I be present? Mindfulness is really a practice. And because it's a practice, that means we have to build some skill and competency over time before it becomes easier. So trying to focus on being non-judgmental, trying to be curious about the experience, trying to be open to the experience can help reduce those negative attitudes that might come up. Any thoughts or questions so far? Again, this is just kind of the bare basics of mindfulness and what it is and what components are a part of it. So I think it's really important to talk, why do we recommend mindfulness? Why is it important? Why is it helpful? You might not be surprised by some of these, but research shows that practicing mindfulness techniques on a consistent basis, I think I like to highlight that, does have a positive impact on mood and cognition. So we find that people who practice mindfulness tend to feel like their mood is much more manageable, less emotional reaction, and cognitive abilities, those abilities to help us with learning, accomplishing, difficult or challenging tasks, be able to problem solve, those abilities in our cognition that are very helpful with school, may I add, those tend to improve with practices of mindfulness. And there's a lot of research out there that also shows that mindfulness practices have a positive impact on physical health and well-being. Now, there's a range of different mindfulness practices and techniques. So I just used meditation as an example because there's been a lot of research on that, finding that it's been positive in helping manage symptoms related to asthma, chronic pain, heart disease, high blood pressure. Irritable bowel syndrome, that's one that people aren't always familiar with. Oh, and I spelled it bowl, not bowel, my bad. Sleep problems, tension headaches, anxiety, and depression. So it not only has a positive benefit on your mental health, mood, and cognition, but can also have really positive health and well-being aspects. So it can help us in managing those. Any questions or thoughts? And then here are really the more specific ways it can benefit us in terms of mood and cognition specifically. I think this is really helpful to kind of focus because I think we can say, oh, mental health improves with the practice of mindfulness, but in what ways? And maybe in what ways could it be beneficial for you if you're considering, practicing, if you're wanting to continue to practice, if you're wanting to learn more about this. So reduced rumination. So that's kind of reducing that kind of cycle of thinking that kind of spirals or focuses around one particular or a few particular stressful things. So maybe I had something stressful happen yesterday, and then I find that my thoughts just really center around that, and I am struggling to get my thoughts to take a break or a step back from that particular stressor in my mind. Stress reduction. Oh my gosh, yes. Mindfulness has been very beneficial in helping people feel a reduction in their stress, but I think more importantly, feel more relaxed, and not just in a sense of the mind, but also in the sense of our physical experience. Working memory can also benefit from mindfulness. That's kind of your ability to hold information in the short term. So for example, if I were to give you a set of steps and then have you follow those steps, your ability to hold those steps in your mind while you're then following through with that. You can imagine how that would be really beneficial in an academic environment as you're learning new information, applying new information, and utilizing that working memory can be helpful. Focus and attention. This has been a really positive area of research we've found with mindfulness practices. So if you find that, you have difficulties, maintaining your focus and attention on certain tasks, things like a lecture, reading, or going through kind of homework or projects, this could be really helpful in getting an improved focus and attention for you. Less emotional reactivity. The belief is that, mindfulness helps us build more awareness of ourselves so that when stressful things come up, we may experience less of a negative or reactive experience and more space to kind of have awareness of what's happening for us and regulate those emotions a little better. Improved cognitive flexibility. I think kind of the opposite of flexibility might be kind of stubborn or rigid, right? This is kind of, I'm more flexible in my thinking. This could be as simple as relationally, right? Maybe one day I'm really open to what you're saying, whereas another day where I feel more stressed or run down, I'm less open to what you're saying. So this would help improve that flexibility. So as things are coming up, you feel a little bit more adaptable and open. And this is actually one that the next one is kind of one that people don't realize, but actually there's been some positive studies that found a correlation between mindfulness practices and relationship satisfaction. There are a lot of theories about why that may help, but we do see that there is a positive correlation that suggests that people who practice mindfulness techniques tend to have more positive relationship satisfaction. And one kind of belief around that or theory around that is that we are less kind of triggered or stressed when stressful things occur, when conflicts arise. We're more adaptable, more willing and open to having a conversation, whereas maybe if we're not practicing those things, we're a little bit more short, we're a little bit more stubborn, and feel that stress in a much more intense way. And I think overall, the biggest thing I will say is that mindfulness techniques have had a positive impact on a range of mental health issues. Depression, anxiety, I already mentioned those, but some other ones include experiences of trauma. Mindfulness techniques are things we highly recommend when someone has experienced trauma or is experiencing trauma-related symptoms, and experiences of ADHD, whether you have been diagnosed and experience ADHD or that you suspect you may have attentional difficulties. This is a really helpful practice that helps one be able to have more awareness of their attention and focus and be able to refocus themselves better. Any thoughts so far? I'm curious, were you surprised by any of the benefits that we've talked about so far? Are there ones that are sticking out to you as reasons why you might want to practice mindfulness or practice it more? Oh, I think I see one. Oh, I like that. Also boosts emotional well-being. Yes, very much so. I will tell you the one that I guess I didn't foresee being, related, but makes sense is the relationship satisfaction. I think that's one you don't typically think of, like, oh, how could mindfulness be beneficial? I think that's one that was a little surprising to me when I started going into the research. I'm curious if there's other ones that are sticking out to you. Or even any of the health benefits too. I think that can be sometimes surprising to people. In what ways could, mindfulness be beneficial in managing symptoms?
I think like with the health side, for me, it's like kind of challenging to, because we're like in a very instant gratification kind of, we live in that kind of society. So it's like easy to like expect these results to happen right away and get kind of discouraged when like you meditate for 3 days and you're like, what the hell? Like things aren't coming together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where I think where you mentioned consistency really kind of comes into play, right? Because it's like an ongoing maintenance thing, right? You don't just do it 3 times and you're done, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'll just tell you anecdotally, I've worked in counseling for a number of years now. And I will say, whenever I introduce mindfulness or any specific mindfulness practices that we'll go through here in a second, I give the caveat that if you have never done this or you haven't done it much, or even just recently, it may feel really frustrating at first. That's usually the most common experience I have. People will come back and they will say, nope, not for me. I struggled. It was really difficult. I couldn't feel like I, could let go of thoughts. And so I always kind of give people a caveat now, being a more seasoned counselor, of like, this is going to maybe feel frustrating at first, but it will get easier. And it really is a practice. The more you practice, the easier it becomes. So if you're finding that you're really just overwhelmed with thoughts or stressful things on your mind, or you feel like you're more stuck up in your head than you are in a present moment, then this is really going to be a helpful technique, but it's not going to happen overnight. With regular and consistent practice, this gets a lot easier. And I just like to highlight that. So yeah, the first day, the first 3 days, you might notice that it's frustrating. You might notice that judgment's coming up, and trying to build awareness of what's coming up, and then try to fall back into that non-judgmental space, try to fall back into being present in the moment and letting go of some of those thoughts. And I just find overall it gets easier with time, but also when people very consistently practice this, they feel better, like just hands down. People who regularly practice mindfulness feel better. And that's not only supported by research, but I'll just tell you anecdotally, when I've had clients who, I presented this idea and they've really gone with it, they will say to me, like, it has made such a difference. So I would encourage you to be really open to this. If you haven't tried it before, or if you tried it before and it was unsuccessful, maybe something about what we're talking about will be helpful for you to maybe kind of rethink this. Maybe there's a new way we can approach this and get a different perspective on how we want to approach it. All right. So I've listed some mindfulness practices. There are so many these days, again, with the real intention of being present in the moment and being non-judgmental, being very almost like an observer in the experience, in the process. But these are just some that you could think about as mindfulness practices. I'm sure you've heard of a number of these. Breathing exercises, it's been a very popular one. What I will encourage for those is it's different than simply taking a deep breath. Sometimes I do have people like, yeah, I take deep breaths, that's breathing exercise. there is actually a specific kind of strategic way we approach breathing exercises. There are lots of guided breathing exercises. If you've never practiced it, I would encourage it. We also find that by utilizing breathing exercises, it improves the amount of oxygen going to our brains. And so that makes cognition a little bit better and easier for people. And also has kind of a calming effect on the body if we do it in the right way. There are breathing exercises, if we're not so thoughtful, that actually can make you more anxious. We're taking really short, shallow breaths quickly, we could then become a bit more anxious or agitated. Another one is a body scan meditation. Some of you may have heard of this or practiced this. What's really nice about this is it really connects you with your bodily experiences. This can be particularly beneficial for those who carry tension in particular parts of the body. For me, it's usually my neck and shoulders. For others, it might be your hands, it could be your arms, it could be your chest, it could be, you know, your legs or your feet. So people carry tension in different parts of their body, but this can be a really helpful practice of building awareness about what our body feels like, where we may feel tension, and kind of practicing letting go of some of that tension. I will just tell you, any kind of body scan meditation or related type experience can be very relaxing for the body. If someone is just practicing it for the first time, sometimes I encourage them to do it before bedtime because, man, you're in a really relaxed state to then go to sleep. So if you have any sleep time issues, that can be very helpful. Next one is what we call the 5 senses exercise. If you've ever been in counseling and worked on mindfulness techniques, it's likely that you've heard about this. We'll actually do a little bit of a practice of this here in a minute, but really it's tapping into our sensory experiences and starting to observe our environment, because if I'm kind of tuning into my sensory experience in the present moment, it's hard to focus on my thoughts or the things going on in my brain because I'm focused on what's happening around me. Visualization practice. There is a wide range of mindfulness visualization practices. One that's been really popular in recent years is called Leaves on a Stream. And it's really this practice of visualizing a peaceful place, somewhere that you could visualize a stream. For me, I like to think of a beautiful meadow. I think of, some deer and rabbits, but maybe there's somewhere for you that's a better place to visualize a stream at. And then the part of that specific visualization practice is taking a thought that's coming up for you, placing it on the leaf, and then watching that leaf go down the stream. So it's kind of that visualization practice of letting go of thoughts. Guided meditation, simply as it sounds, a meditative practice. You can find a lot of videos and apps out there nowadays that can help with meditation. For those starting out wanting a free option, to be totally truthful, I encourage people to go to YouTube and create, a playlist of meditations that are easy go-to so that you don't really have to put much thought into it, but you can just follow along. And then the last one are mindfulness practices in specific areas of our lives. So mindful walking. I actually highly encourage this for students on our campus because it's a beautiful campus. This is a great place to practice mindful walking. And what this is really practicing. If you're, let's just take, for example, you're walking across campus for something, whether that's going to class or leaving class or going to a professor's office, and just really trying to be present in that moment, really tapping into your sensory experience. What are you seeing? I mean, gosh, it's such a beautiful campus. There's a lot to see and kind of notice about the environment around you. If there's wind, how that wind feels on your face or on your body. If you hear anything, maybe you hear laughter in the background or, a snowplow coming by. kind of observing those auditory things that may be happening in your environment. And really that practice, again, of being very present and aware of your surroundings while you're walking. So that could be for a range of things. It could be walking between classes. It could be going for an intentional walk, but really practicing this. And I would encourage you today, if you're on campus or you're somewhere else that you're going to be walking to, maybe just try this. Maybe just practice being really present in that moment while you're walking between places. Mindful listening. This is, if you're in a conversation or you're listening to a lecture, or maybe you're listening to a podcast. Trying to be very intentional to what you're listening to. What is being said? What's the meaning of what they're trying to convey? How are they saying it? And if it's somebody in person, maybe noticing how are they expressing themselves? Like me, I'm very, I'm always using my hands to talk. So you can probably see me regularly referencing with my hands, but also like, what is it I'm observing while they're talking? What are maybe the nonverbals I'm catching while I'm listening to them? And last but not least, this is a really common one too, that's becoming actually a lot more popular, is mindful eating. And so this is kind of the practice of being very mindful and thoughtful about when you are eating a meal. Now, I think this has become very popular because it means that we're taking our time while we eat, but this can be very helpful in that we're savoring, the bites that we're having. We're observing the food that is on our plates, and things like that. We're observing what it feels like in our mouth when we're eating. And it does cause us to kind of slow down and be very thoughtful and intentional about what we're eating, how we're eating, and things like that. I see that there's a couple of chats. So while walking, do you listen to music? Is it mindful or not? I think it depends. I think that there's a real benefit to sometimes walking without anything and really taking in what's happening around us. I think oftentimes in our kind of current culture, we feel like we have to be connected to media if we're not currently doing something. And that doesn't mean a bad thing. There are definitely times I listen to music and podcasts on my own. But I would encourage you maybe to try it without. But I do think you could combine it with music that you find relaxing. I have a family member who in the morning loves to put on like meditative sounds while they're getting ready as just kind of a way to be really present in the morning before kind of going into a busy day. I see the Soothing Pod app is a great free option for guided meditations. I use. That's great. I think recommendations are great. There are actually quite a few free meditative apps out there. I would encourage you to explore. And then Michael, I see, I listen to a lot of soft instrumental music without words to help with mindfulness walks. I think that is great. And again, it's thinking about how can you kind of fit this within your world and how can you make this part of maybe your daily practice. If you're regularly walking, maybe it's combining it with walking. If you have times where you can eat and be more mindful of the meal that you're having, trying to utilize that. So there's a lot of great ways in which we can kind of combine this with our daily lives. So now we're going to just practice one. I'm going to trust, since most of you have your cameras off, that you are practicing along with me. This is a really simple one. And the reason I chose such a simple one is just that our lives can be really busy, hectic, chaotic. And this is a simple one that you can use anywhere. You don't have to say it out loud. It could simply be something you're kind of talking to yourself internally about. But this is the 5 senses exercise. So before we kind of jump in, I want you to just notice kind of where your body's at. I want you to just take a deep breath in and then out. And just feel, try to ground yourself in this moment. So first, I want you to notice 5 things you can see. You don't have to put this in the chat unless you want to, but I just want you to take a notice of your environment. What are 5 things that you see? And this is a little more than simply like computer, desk, lamp. It's noticing the details about it. So for example, I have a picture actually right above my monitor here that I love. And it's got orcas and it's, in a snowy kind of Arctic environment, and kind of notice, the movements of the orcas in the picture. There's some fish in there too. So see, it's not just noticing that I have a painting above my monitor. It's also observing some of the details of the things that you're looking at. Next, I want you to notice 4 things you can feel. Think about tactile sensory experiences. So actually, Michael and I were just talking about my sweater right before I came on to this presentation. And I love a cozy sweater. So I love the kind of feel of that cozy knit feel it's got. So thinking about your environment, what are kind of 4 things you can feel? Another thing I'm noticing in this moment is I have a really kind of slick, with a few grooves desk. It's a kind of a wood desk, and kind of feeling it under my fingertips and some of the grooves that are there. So noticing 4 things you can feel in this moment. Now I want you to notice 3 things you can hear. Sometimes, depending on your environment, this is an easier or a harder one. So, for example, for me right now, I noticed right as I brought up this one, someone closed a door nearby. Another thing I might notice is I have a fan running over here, and I can kind of hear that white noise, that cyclical noise of the fan running. What are 3 things that you hear in your environment? And 2 things you can smell. Now, this one, again, depending on the environment, might be trickier. I think in my office, I'm trying to think, I notice a little bit of hint of my heater because I am in an old building. I'm in Mary Forney Hall here on campus. And I also have some old books in here. So I feel like I kind of have smells from old books / my old bookcase that I got over here. What are 2 things? I want you to really, really try to practice this in your own environment. What are 2 things you can smell? And lastly, what is 1 thing that you can taste? So thinking about your taste buds, maybe it's something you recently were drinking or eating, or maybe the lack thereof, just noticing the taste that is currently present. I had some gum, a Minto, right before I came on here. So it's like, oh, I still have that minty kind of taste to my mouth that feels nice. So thinking for you, what is 1 thing that you taste in this moment? And that is the practice. Now, 1 thing I want you to think about is while we practice that, did you notice any other thoughts coming up for you? Did you feel stuck in your head at all? Or did you notice that you felt maybe more present in the moment, or you felt like it was easier to kind of let go of things while we're focusing on this environmental things? What were things that you observed while you practiced this? I think 1 thing that I always notice in this practice is it makes me pay attention to small things that honestly, probably most of the time I ignore or don't take much time. For example, I'm talking about this painting above my monitor. It's there every day. How often do I actually take a look at this and say, oh, like I've really never noticed these kind of fun, interesting details? Did you notice anything while you were practicing this? I would love to hear your kind of experience of this. anything that you noticed come up for you while you were practicing this?
Well, I'll say like one thing that was cool with like the things you could see is like I just finished drinking a smoothie and it's in like a clear cup, right? Um, and it's got, you know, whatever the stuff on the side of the cup 'cause it's a thick smoothie. But um the way the liquid like fell down in the cup, it almost looks like river scouring, you know, like you see up in Alaska where like with the
Yeah,
glacier melt. I don't know if that makes sense.
yeah,
Um,
it makes sense to me.
yeah.
Actually, I was in Alaska not that long ago.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah. So it's like in that like I you know, it's one of those things like you see it 1,000 times and you're like, oh, it's dirty, right? But it's like also like when you look at it, take a moment to actually really look at it. It's pretty cool. I was like, well,
Jessica, I see you said, yes, noticed fine prints on the carpet that I never realized. I have been seeing this almost daily. Oh, I love that. One thing I will add as we're kind of talking about mindfulness practices, as I think about my own practice of mindfulness, and I think one of the big takeaways that we don't often think about with mindfulness practices, but one of the things that I love most about practicing it not only means I can be more present in a moment, but that means I can be more present when I'm experiencing a memory. You ever been in that moment where you're thinking to yourself, this is going to be a memory. This is going to be something that I remember, whether that's a fun time with friends, whether it's doing something cool or unique or a great opportunity. You've been in those moments where you're like, I know this is going to be a good memory for me. And I love that because then that means you can practice being more present in that memory making. And when you're more present in the memory making, that means you're building more details for your memory to build upon so that later, when you think about that memory, it might be more vivid in a way that if we weren't so much present, might be harder to remember those details. So that's one thing I personally really love about mindfulness practices. All right. And last but not least, in terms of strategies, we're going to talk about a few mood boosting strategies. So they kind of have a mindfulness essence without being necessarily mindfulness techniques. But again, things that have been found to help us boost our mood. Maybe in this dreary winter landscape, you're feeling a bit low. I know there are some who are like, yes, no. So maybe that's less relevant. But thinking about those times where you maybe experience some low points, these may be really helpful things to think about. Gratitude practices, man, there has been so much research on this. When we practice observing and identifying the things in our life that we are grateful for, we tend to feel better. And kind of our culture and society, we do have a tendency to look at kind of grass is greener, like I'll feel better when, or I'm always kind of working towards a goal, or I'll be happy when, and kind of always looking beyond. And we don't often take the time to really think about what is going on in my life that I currently feel good about, that I currently feel grateful for. That could be people, that could be relationships, that could be things. It could be living beings. I feel very grateful for my dogs. It could be grateful for a time in your life or an experience in your life, an opportunity. Or simply a place that you're at. Sometimes I walk around this campus and I just think, man, I'm really lucky to be in such a beautiful landscape. So often people have jobs where they're stuck in these like cubicles and build, solid kind of corporation buildings. It's like, oh man, if I have a break, I can just go walk and have a beautiful campus, right? And that also leads me to the next one, positive reframing, right? If I'm looking through my experience through kind of gray colored glasses per se, or a negative view, it has an ability to really tint our entire experience. And it's often a lot easier to identify the negatives as it is the positives. So maybe there's something I'm feeling a bit frustrated about or stressed about. Maybe there's a way in which I can reframe it that either puts kind of a positive spin on it or creates an opportunity. Maybe there's something I really don't have control over, but maybe I can see it as an opportunity for growth in some way. Utilizing physical movement and nature as a way to refresh the mind. So this could be going for a walk outside. Ooh, as simple as that sounds, it makes a world of difference. If I'm having a tough day and I can just go out for a few minutes, take a walk, I usually come back a little bit more refreshed, a little more grounded than if I hadn't. And physical movement, that can be of any kind, could be the kind of movement you enjoy. And movement is different. Movement doesn't mean you have to go to the gym. If you like spending time at the gym, that's great. And if you prefer dance or going for walks or runs, physical movement can show up in lots of different ways. And trying to combine it with some experiences of nature can also be very beneficial. Journaling or voice note. I always mention voice note for those who maybe struggle more with writing down their thoughts and ideas. Voice note is an app available for a lot of phones, or some way to kind of record your voice, in which you can kind of record your thought experiences. What's going on for you that day? What did you notice about that day? Maybe it's a way to journal what you're grateful for that day. And sometimes people find this very helpful because it's a way to kind of process what's happening in the brain. And when we can take what's happening in the brain and process it outside of ourselves, it often becomes easier for us to kind of look at it and kind of problem solve with it. Whereas if it's just stuck in our head and we don't have an ability to process outside ourselves, sometimes can leave us feeling kind of stuck. And last but not least, affirmations. Reminding ourselves maybe of either positive characteristics we have that can help us, reminding ourselves of positive things happening in our life, like a gratitude practice, or reminding ourselves of our goals or our future kind of direction we want to move. So affirmations can be very positive and have a positive impact on mood. Lastly, as we're kind of finishing up, I do want to mention the Counseling and Mental Health Center. That's where I work. You'll see a picture of the building. That is Mary Forney Hall. I did show a map of it too, in case you were like, where is Mary Forney Hall? So it's almost kind of a diagonal from the admin lawn and right across the parking lot from the Lionel Hampton School of Music as well. So if you're curious, like, where is Mary Forney Hall, or you want to get connected with us, that's where we're located. Here is some information. We're open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Contact information. If you're thinking that you want more kind of one-on-one help with managing mental health symptoms or even practicing mindfulness techniques, we are always available to students, and we're free. That's the part I always emphasize. Free counseling. How often do you get that in a lifetime? We offer individual, group, and couples counseling, as well as urgent and crisis support. So if you're having a really challenging day and you just need someone to talk to, we have people available. I also want to just do a little shout out for College of Graduate Studies COGS in their workshops. I just took a picture of kind of their workshops that they're doing right now. So there's a bunch happening. If you haven't looked at this website, I encourage you, go check it out. If you're looking to be more involved or opportunities to get more knowledge or experience in graduate work, these are great opportunities that I would encourage you to connect with. Also, gets you outside your house and maybe connected to a larger network as well. And last but not least, I just want to say thank you for attending this presentation. I'll be here for a few minutes if you have any questions, but here is some information about me in case after this you have any questions or thoughts that you want to share. But it's been wonderful to be with you all today. But yeah, I'll see you for a few more minutes if you have any questions or thoughts or things you want to share with me.